Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Thursday, November 9th, 2023. This is the excerpt, formerly 5 Things. Today, we recap a fiery Republican debate, plus what Ivanka Trump said in her testimony at the New York fraud trial surrounding the Trump Organization, and how a bill could help farmers fight climate change. Republican presidential candidates faced off in Miami last night for the third primary debate. It was a smaller crowd from the previous 2 events, with 5 candidates on stage. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott all qualified. GOP frontrunner, former President Donald Trump, again skipped the debate. More than half of the 2-hour-long debate focused on foreign policy. Several candidates called on Hamas to release hostages, and DeSantis said he would cancel visas for students aligning themselves with Hamas.
I was the first presidential candidate to say, if you are here on a student visa as a foreign national, you're making common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling your visa and I'm sending you home.
For his part, former Governor Chris Christie recalled his time leading New Jersey after the 9/11 terror attacks, protecting synagogues and mosques with police presence. He said that you must work with both sides. Senator Tim Scott suggested that federal funding for universities and visas for foreign students could be revoked if they don't show sufficient support for Israel. All the candidates on stage pledged to ban TikTok, claiming it helps China spy on the U.S. Things got heated when Ramaswamy took a personal shot at Haley.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Your adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer.
Beyond foreign policy, candidates went back and forth on migration and the southern border, with Tim Scott calling for stricter surveillance and Ron DeSantis saying he would send the military to the border. On abortion, Ramaswamy said he was upset that voters in Ohio passed an amendment to enshrine abortion rights in the state's constitution. Haley said she considers herself pro-life, but that she believes abortion is a personal issue for every woman and every man. You can read a full recap of last night's debate on usatoday.com. Meanwhile, in New York, Donald Trump's civil fraud trial continued yesterday, and it was his daughter Ivanka Trump's turn to testify. I spoke with USA Today Justice Department correspondent Aisha Bagchi for a recap. Aisha, thanks for hopping on.
I'm glad to be here, Taylor.
So Ivanka Trump took the stand in this fraud trial, and she, unsurprisingly, was grilled about all kinds of financial statements. Aisha, I know you're still there at the courthouse. Did we learn anything new here?
Well, I think a big priority for the state when it was questioning Ivanka Trump was just to get her answers on the record about what she knew about her father's financial statements. She didn't say much that was very different from her 2 brothers on this issue. They were grilled about what they knew about the details in his financial statements, specifically about his claims, about the value of his assets, and about his net worth. They said they didn't know much about the details. That's what Ivanka Trump said as well. She was asked specifically about inquiries that were made on a project she worked on when she was at the Trump Organization and what those inquiries had to do with the financial statements. And she said she didn't know anything about that.
You know, you were on earlier in the week talking about Donald Sr.'s testimony and how contentious it was. What was the vibe like during Ivanka's testimony compared to that?
The atmosphere for Ivanka's testimony was really different from her father. She had a very calm demeanor. She smiled a lot. She never got riled up about anything. Her father's testimony couldn't have been more different in all those ways. He was very combative. He showed total disdain for the proceedings and what was happening in the trial. Ivanka was very calm, very subdued. She answered questions. She was very polite.
So we've now heard from Donald Trump himself and the 3 Trump children. What's next for this trial going forward?
The state is resting its case. There will be some motions being heard later this week. And then next week, the defense is going to be able to put on really its case. Donald Trump has made it very clear that he cares about what happens in this case. He's prioritized it, even though it's a civil case. It doesn't involve any threat of him going to jail or prison. But a lot is on the line in terms of his business operations in the state of New York and in terms of money. The state of New York wants him and other defendants to cough up hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's very clear that the defense is going to put on a case. So that's what we're going to start to see next week.
All right. Aisha Bagchi covers the Justice Department for USA Today. Thank you, Aisha.
Thanks, Taylor.
Negotiations are underway to reach a 3-day humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza in exchange for the release of around a dozen hostages held by Hamas. That's according to officials from Egypt, the UN, and a Western diplomat speaking on condition of anonymity. The deal would crucially enable more aid to enter Gaza and is reportedly being brokered by Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. More than 10,500 Palestinians have been killed in the war, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. More than 1,400 people in Israel have been killed, most of them in the October 7th Hamas attack, when Hamas also took 239 hostages. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken yesterday called for a Palestinian-led government for Gaza and the West Bank after the war ends. The comments seem to show U.S. differences with Israel, a close ally, for what the future should look like for the Palestinian territories. Blinken's outline for the future came after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Monday that Israel's military would likely hold security control of Gaza for an indefinite period. This year's Farm Bill could include significant measures to help fight climate change. I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Elizabeth Weiss to learn more. Hello, Beth.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for hopping back on the show. So let's just start here. What is the Farm Bill and what's being proposed in this year's version?
Oh, the Farm Bill. It is so big, it's really kind of hard to get your arms around. It is a every 5-year piece of legislation that basically undergirds agriculture and really food in the United States and has done so since 1933. It was starting during the Depression to support farmers and food pricing. So it's been around for a long time. It's on this weird every 5-year cycle. It is big and it keeps getting bigger. In 2018, the last Farm Bill, it was about $425 billion. This year, for the 2023 version, if in fact we get one, it could be over $1 trillion, and some people have estimated as high as $1.5 trillion, though we don't know yet because we haven't seen any of the language and we don't know what's going to be in this year's Farm Bill.
And why can the Farm Bill be such a critical part of the fight against climate change?
So yeah, that's interesting. So the Farm Bill, it undergirds the pricing for farmers. And the reason it's important for climate change is most of us don't think about this, but agriculture in the U.S. produces 10% of all our greenhouse gas emissions. So, that's a good chunk of what we need to bring down to fight climate change. Scientists who study this, they say the other part is that as we increasingly decarbonize our transportation systems and our electricity systems, agriculture will be a larger and larger percent of U.S. carbon emissions, which is why we need to bring it down. The good news is we actually know how to do that. We have, I feel like this is my constant refrain, we have the technology. It's the $8 million man scenario. Farmers know how to do this. They plant cover crops, they do crop rotation. A lot of it's around soil health. It's also about the more judicious application of fertilizer, not just kind of throwing as much fertilizer as you possibly can on a field, but timing it and getting it at the right time and the right amount. So you're only using what you need to grow your crops. Remember, fertilizer is nitrogen, and that actually contributes to greenhouse gases. There's also some really intriguing work going on. Cow belches. Actually, cows have, they have all those stomachs, and they're always chewing their cud, and they're busy digesting what they eat, and they belch out a lot of methane. And there's interesting work being done to figure out, are there ways that we can feed cows and other animals better such that they produce less methane, and that too would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So farmers can play a really big part in fighting climate change, but because farmers work on such a razor-thin margin of money, they need federal programs through USDA that let them implement the things that they already know how to do and in fact want to do, but they need federal help to kind of get them going, to jumpstart them.
Beth, we know these things can move slowly on Capitol Hill, to say the least. What's holding this up in Congress?
Oh, what isn't holding this up in Congress right now? Congress has been a tad dysfunctional of late. I mean, farm bills, they are huge, enormous pieces of legislation. The last one in 2018, it was over 1,000 pages. They're in multiple parts. They're really complicated. What happened this year is so much of the farm bill actually ended on September 30th. And those programs kind of continue along their merry way for a little bit. Theoretically, Congress should go in and re-up the farm bill before December 30th when it goes up. It's unclear if Congress has the wherewithal to do that this time round because they're busy with other things right now, like perhaps funding the government. It's very likely that what will happen is Congress will just do a one-year continuation at exactly the same funding levels we have right now for the farm bill, and then deal with it next year. I mean, next year's an election year, and you also don't want to be writing a really complex, nuanced piece of legislation in the middle of a presidential election, because there's a lot of ways that could go wrong.
All right, Elizabeth Wiese, thank you as always.
So happy to be of help.
The actors' strike is finally over. The Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, or SAG-AFTRA, agreed to a new 3-year contract with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, representing major studios and streaming services. The agreement ends a historic 118-day strike that began in July. It allows studios to resume production of TV shows and movies that had largely been shut down for 6 months, ever since a separate writers' strike began in May. A SAG-AFTRA statement after the strike said the contract achieved pay raises, unprecedented provisions to protect members from the threat of AI, and a new streaming participation bonus that helps actors get better compensated for work that ends up succeeding on streaming services. The studio side called the agreement a new paradigm. Be sure to stay tuned today at 4 p.m. Eastern Time for a special edition of The Excerpt when my colleague Dana Taylor will take a look at politicians' personal lives and whether they should matter to voters. You can catch the episode right here on this feed. Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can find us every morning on whatever your favorite podcast app is. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'm back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.